Today, we're going to be talking about sales tips for senior client managers. Ed, would you like to get us started and introduce the topic of developing high converting senior client managers and the importance of focusing on this in order to grow the practice?
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. And yeah, this is a great topic because it's basically about getting more word of mouth referrals. Obviously, getting more word of mouth referrals is very important because not only does it endorse what you're doing if people are happy, but getting more clients for no cost, basically, but just for doing a good job. People telling their friends, great you guys are, and referring their friends to you. To me, that's the greatest compliment you can have. But the opposite can happen as well. If your body language is really busy, so if someone said, Thomas, how are you today? And your response is, I'm just so flat out. And then you take 3 months to turn their work around. There's a reluctance on them to refer you to friends. And because they might put up with a 3-month turnaround time, but they certainly don't want to wear the backlash of a friend's complaint about your service. It's extremely important to ensure that you're doing a good job. And I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know, just covering off the what at the moment. And then we'll drill into how we do that as we progress through. But to be able to respond quickly to your clients, for the senior client managers, when they get an email, to be able to respond on the same day or the next morning. That's our policy at Chan and Naylor. It's a sackable offence if you don't respond either on the same day or the next morning, because if you see from the other person's point of view, if they've emailed you and you're responding very quickly, then there's more building of a relationship with you rather than someone who doesn't respond to them. Turning work around quickly will also endorse your organisation for them to refer their friends and family to you. Obviously, doing a good job, spending more time in front of them. So often we're so busy, we're just doing the work and grinding away. Pareto tells us that 20% of what we do gives 80% of the results, and 80% of what we do only gives 20% of the results. So if you sit there and you do the grinding and you send the work out to the client, then that's 80% of the effort that only gives you 20% of the results. But if you get in front of your client, if you speak to them, if you talk to them about their results, if you do some tax planning with them, the effort to do that is only 20%. It might only take you half an hour, 15 minutes, an hour, compared to actually doing the work, which could take you 4, 5, 6 hours. But that 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour that you spend with them is the 20% that Pareto talks about, the 20% effort that gives you 80% of the results. And we're going to drill into how we do that, because often when you talk to a senior client manager, they always say things like this to you, or they say things like this to me, because I've been coaching firms now for quite a while, and I've got my own firm that I've experienced. And we have a thing called Wize Growth, another service called Wize Growth, which we provide a hands-on, one-on-one coaching service to you. But when we've been involved with those, then often, the senior client managers always say, well, not always, but often say, well, I haven't got enough time and I'm just already so busy. And I remember when I coached Jamie's firm, his senior client manager said the same thing to me. And at the time, they were handling about 300,000 in fees, and they said they couldn't do any more. That's it, maximum, maxed out. Senior client managers were doing around $800,000 to $900,000. So it is about doing the right kind of work. So we're going to get into the details today.
Ed, it's so important to get back to the basics. Before we dive into this topic, can you discuss briefly why it's so critical, and you mentioned this before about getting the capacity and the team structure right, why it's so critical to get our team structure and capacity plan right if we want to increase sales and have client managers focus on sales. Can you please explain?
Yeah, absolutely. If you don't give capacity to your senior client managers, and if you're very small, you could be the senior client manager yourself. You could be holding that role. But if you don't give capacity, then they end up doing the wrong kind of work. And if you don't have the right people below them, and I talk about getting your resource mix right. So basically, you've got to get the foundation right first before you're able to take on more sales. Because there's no point in getting a whole lot of new business and you can't deliver. That causes more problems and just hurts your reputation more than if you just said no to the work. So you've got to get your foundation right. And often when a senior client manager says to me that they're just so busy they haven't got any more time, it's because of several reasons. One is because they like doing the grinding work. Okay, so they don't like talking to people. In that case, then you're playing that person out of position. It's a bit like a sporting team, whether you talk about soccer or football, everybody's got a position on the field. And if you play someone out of position, if you put a goalie on the wing and expect him or her to perform as a winger, you're going to be disappointed. So that's the first thing. So they may not be suited for a senior client manager role, whose role is to talk to clients, who communicates to clients, who explains the results, and who's able to respond to their emails very, very quickly and be available to the client as often as they need to be. And if they don't like dealing with people, or they have a difficulty in dealing with people or talking to people or communicating with people, then you're playing that person out of position. That's generally the first one. The second one is that you've got the wrong resource mix underneath them. So if you have too many juniors underneath them, then the work all ends up on their plate because the work's not getting done. And if the work all ends up on their plate, then they won't have any time over to get in front of their clients, because the more often they get in front of their clients, the more referrals they'll get from them. And so you could have the wrong resource mix, but you may just be very, very under-resourced, that you've got to use your capacity planner that's found in the Wize Vault to work out your capacity so that it allows the senior client manager to have time to talk to the clients. So you've got to get the foundation right, because if you don't get the foundation right and you add a second story to it, you're going to collapse the whole thing. When we do this coaching, this one-on-one coaching with the foundation, we always start with a blueprint, with getting the right structure in place, and then we look for the people to fill those positions. So we don't structure our business around the staff we have. Start off with a blueprint and we find the right staff to fill those positions. It's a bit like coaching a soccer team or an AFL team or any sort of sporting team. You've got to have the positions on the field, and you look for the people to fill those positions. And that's what you do in accounting business as well.
That's excellent. Ed, you have a saying that you shouldn't slow down sales, but rather ramp up production. So you've shared your views on this. And can you tell us, how have you tried to instill this mentality with your senior client managers?
Yeah, absolutely. That's correct in what you said, that you shouldn't slow down sales because you're not getting the work out. You should increase your production. And the reason for that is because sales is very difficult. It's a bit like creating a bit of a momentum. If you have a bowling ball and it's standing still, it's really hard to get that a lot of effort to get that bowling ball moving. But once it's moving, you can just tap it along. The effort to keep it rolling along is very, very little, but the effort to get it moving from a standing start is a huge effort. Now, I've learned that in the past where we hadn't got our production, our capacity right. So we slowed down the sales, turned off the marketing, and then when we got our production right, we tried to turn it back on. But the effort to get it going again was enormous. So it was a lot easier to ramp up your production. But it's not about just throwing bodies at the workload. And often accounting firms or businesses generally think that I'll just hire more people and I'll just throw more bodies at the problem. But it's a lot more scientific than that, because if you look at the soccer team, went and recruited 3 goalies instead of a winger because you needed a winger, then that whole team is going to be out of balance. It's a lot more sophisticated than just hiring a lot more bodies. You've got to get the resource mix right. You've got to have a number of juniors in there. You've got to have a number of intermediates with 2 to 3 to 4 years experience. You've got to have a senior in there to make sure that they're checking the work. And then you've got to have someone that's able to communicate. It's not all accountants are the same. And the graduates that come out of uni, 80% of them are grinders, so people that like production people, and less than 20% are people persons. They like communicating and dealing with people. So you've got to pick the right people and position them correctly. Otherwise, you won't retain them, number one. And number two, the team becomes very clunky and you won't get the efficiencies out of it. You could have lots of bodies in there, so to speak, and your profits are very low because they're all playing out of position. And getting that team structure right, bringing complementary skills together, it's really important to ensure that the efficiencies and the flow of work and the happiness of the staff all working together. And when you get them all working together, that's what I call a championship team. A championship team, ordinary people working together with complementary skills, will always beat a team of champions who may be great individuals, but they're working on their own. And that's the difference between a flat team structure and a deep and narrow team structure.
Thank you, Ed.